how can you manage change personally? What can you personally do that when they come to you and say, we're doing it differently now than the way you've done for the past year, 10 years, 5 years, or we're going to do something totally new. How can you personally help move it forward instead of getting stalled or stuck and refusing to change? A couple ideas. We've got one right here. Simon, oh, here comes John. John's coming from behind you. Tell him who you are.
Hi, my name's Joanna Dessau, and I manage the San Jose Water Pollution Control Plant, or the Regional Wastewater Facility. I gotta get that name right. New name change.
She's dealing with change.
Yes. And we've been going through a lot of work inside of capital and O&M integration and engagement in the whole world, which has been one long year of managing differences. Differences in what people think, differences in how people think, differences in what they've experienced. You know, because in our business, it's all about how great a story you can tell, right? Truly, right? I'm an operator. My background is in operations. Some of the best stories were told in the middle of the night when someone's really just getting right into it. And it's like, it could have been something really small when it actually happened. By the time I heard it, it was like, oh my God, the sky is falling. It's over and over again, though, what I've seen us have to do in this past year of change is every time it comes up like a, oh my God, the sky is falling conversation, it's a, yeah, it could. It's a diffusion of the stuff that comes with it, the emotional connection with, oh my God, how can they possibly think of changing it that way? What are they thinking? I've seen disaster. I know what disaster looks like, and that looks like a disaster. It's that constant, because we are wired in our business. We are constantly looking at contingency, constantly waiting for the disaster, waiting for that other shoe. We can't help ourselves. It's what we do. But if we can just find a way to lessen that emotional response and actually point people direction of, you know what, you could be right. So let's talk about what kind of contingency plan we need to plan for. But just take it down a notch and keep taking it down.
So here's what I heard her say. I heard her say, actually name the emotion, address it, and then bring it back off of that a little bit and say, what can we do to make it happen? What steps can we take? One more, let's do one more. We've got one right here. Simon's coming. Emily, tell them your name, who you're with.
Hi, I'm Emily from Rialto Water Services, Veolia. I am a first attendee, and I have only been introduced 3 years into the city of Rialto and the water and wastewater, so I'm very new. I work in utility billing, and I would like for myself, my personal change, to get into the wastewater. I guess my choice of career, I would like to continue to pursue learning and through the wastewater by doing that personal change. So I'm very happy to be here and along doing the personal change, going from utility billing, being motivated from customers with higher rates in the city of Rialto. We've had a 25% increase for the last 3 years. We have one more for 19%. So the increase of rates and educating the customer by phone and in person at the front counter has been very intensive and very motivational to now work and get to know more about the plant and the usage instead of just educating my customer by phone, but going out there in the community and being more active, more proactive. So that's my personal change.
So Emily said here what was interesting, she talked about education, and she also talked about education for herself. Go ahead and give her a hand clap, yes. Yes, a first timer. So just an observation, Emily is sitting at the same table with 2 retirees from the water profession. All 3 of them are still here to learn. There's your entranceway in dealing with change, being open-minded, curious, and learning. Celeste?
So before we go off the conflict slide, and it is all about change management, and when you went into this job, you didn't think, well, I'm going to be a change manager. No, you didn't think that. But really, that's your job now. But there's a gorilla in the room that was brought up during our break right here. So I'll give everybody a chance to shout out, what's the gorilla in the room? Ag. So everybody in California knows that 80% of the water goes to ag, 20% of the water goes to urban use or suburban use. So in California, a little bit of water law history here. All the water in California is owned in the collective by all the people in California. When we say you have a water right, you don't own that water. In fact, you never own that water individually. You have a right to hunt for that water under certain circumstances, and if you catch it, you can put it to beneficial use. Beneficial use is growing things, it's manufacturing things, it's keeping your body healthy. We've included beneficial use to be grass. We may change that. And so when your number came down that Felicia articulated, a lot of people say, well, what happened to ag? Where's their number? Ag's dealt with really differently. We didn't ask ag to voluntarily or to mandatorily cut back. We simply did not deliver them the water. They did not get their deliveries in the Central Project or in the California State Project. We just shorted them. And depending on their right, the way the water rights goes, first in time, first in right. So you have senior water right holders. They're going to get some water before the juniors. The juniors are getting 0. You know, 0 is a very small number. Seniors are getting less than 20%. So they got their shortage. It wasn't a decision. They weren't asked to do anything. They just didn't get the delivery. And what they did in response was they pumped. They relied on groundwater. You may have read we had bumper crops on so many commodities this year because actually in the Mediterranean climate, which is why it's so good to grow things here, is when it rains, it knocks off your blossoms, it gives you mildew. You know, rain is kind of a problem. You need the water, but you take a hit also. So the perfect scenario is if it doesn't rain at all, you have groundwater and you can apply that without destroying your plants or affecting your plants, giving them the irrigation that they need, you get a bumper crop. That's what happened last year. They're not going to be able to continue to pump that way. So their shortage is going to come. And if you're not wealthy, you can't dig a well deep enough to pump water any longer. So ag is getting their due. The reason I had that slide showing apples, wine, and orange juice, et cetera, is we're not reminded very often how much water it really takes to grow that food. It really takes that much water. You can't grow an apple on 10 gallons or 6 gallons. They can do a little bit more. We have some flood irrigators, not that much, but people who grow food are price takers, not price makers. So when they bring their tomatoes to the market, they're competing on a world price. The world price is set by all the tomatoes that week or that day in the world. So you can't say, okay, I put $1 million new drip system in, and I'm going to have to recoup that, so I'm adding 5 cents a pound to my tomatoes. People will say, well, you can do that all you want. I'm paying the world price, so that's it. They're price takers, not price makers. So if our policy in California is to reduce that 80% that ag uses, our policy also has to be that through the federal NRCS or through Food and Ag, through some other mechanism, we have to, as a society, participate in the cost of that infrastructure because it's simply, the price points are not going to make that happen. We enjoy incredibly cheap food and great diversity of food, more so than any place else in the world, more so than any time in all of our history. That may not always be that way. We may be in a situation that you eat strawberries only during the strawberry month, you eat watermelons. Jim and I were talking about this earlier, only in July because we don't have the carbon footprint, we don't have the water, we don't have the finances to deliver that cornucopia of food that we've enjoyed thus far. So ag is really a different animal than us farmers who are growing grass. So that's conflict. So that means your job description is now a change manager, whole new job description. And we've worked on that, and we believe that we've been practicing since 1968. It's not perfect yet, but we've had some practice, and we are committed to working across those boundaries, either district boundaries or professional boundaries, and find where we can input efficiencies and synergies in the entire water cycle. And we've come up with our plan called One Water, One Watershed, and it's known as OWOW. And it's a plan of how the entire watershed, looking holistically at not just wastewater, stormwater, and clean water, but also land use, habitat, energy use, carbon footprint, all of those big challenges that we have in the 21st century integrated into how do we best manage this watershed for resiliency. We're not even focusing on sustainability. Sustainability says you can continue doing what you're doing for generations to come. We don't think Mother Nature works that way. We think Mother Nature is constantly changing. We're constantly changing. Everything's constantly changing. We have to be able to be constantly responding and reacting to those changes and realize as we develop our policies, there is a tolerance so that if a little bit goes wrong, we can still survive. If a lot goes wrong, we might be able to survive, but we're planning for that kind of change. And so that's resiliency, and that's our goal. We were granted Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, the Ask Center's Award for Innovation. Actually, that was kind of embarrassing that they singled this out as being a particularly innovative plan. The reason it was embarrassing is the rest of the world has already been doing this. We're slow. The reason the rest of the world has already been doing this is that they've never had the luxury of as much money as we had. They could never solve their problems one by one as we have historically. They had to work with partners. They had to say, well, I've only got this much money. You have some money. Let's bring in some other guys. And together we can do a systemic fix to our problems. And that's where we're focusing today, on the systemic fixes. So we have 9 principles. And as we go through these really quickly, I want you to think about one and to pick one that resonates with you, that you will then think about how you're going to go forth as a change agent to make that principle, give that principle life. So we look at the watershed as the hydrologic whole. You're in the water business. You know what that means. Your neighbors do not know what that means. If you say, we're going to look at the hydrologic whole of the watershed, you know, it's not going to fly. So you have to think of your own metaphors, or how are you going to translate that to let people understand that there is this dynamic, the hydrologic cycle, that makes our world go round, and that's important to us. What next principle is we were going to work in concert with Mother Nature because it's cost effective. Mother Nature replenishes our aquifers for free. If we pave them over, we'll have to do that, and we're just not as good as Mother Nature, except for in wastewater cleanup, of course, which are really efficient. Third principle is to see each problem as integrated. It's interrelated with all the other. Our problems don't stand alone. Just like when you have a fight with your spouse, you know, it's not always one person's fault. There's a little bit of fault to go around for everybody. Every problem is that same way. It takes a lot of energy to solve problems within this holistic context, and it's not easy, and it's really going to challenge us, but it's also kind of fun because it has a much long-lasting impact. One of our themes is to collaborate across boundaries. We've talked about the physical boundaries of your own district or your city, but also the professional boundaries of, I'm a wastewater guy, you know, I really don't get involved in flood. You're going to have to be responsible for flood too. You got to think about that because the drop that you're treating in the wastewater plant, or I'd like to say water recovery plant, when you're crafting new water in your job in the water recovery plant, that drop was flood water at one point. And we really need to think about it almost on the molecular level, drop by drop, even though it goes from ice to snow or to water to all these different forms. Unless we manage that entire cycle, we're missing the boat. Another big principle is nobody can do it alone. Nobody has the authority, the money, the smarts, the power to do it alone. They can do an aspect, but they can't do all of it. We can only do it correctly together when we're all bringing all the different voices, all the different perspectives. That's, you know, that transaction analysis. That's something nobody was trained in your jobs. I don't know if anybody was trained in it, but it's something that we need to have as our skill set going forward. And then to think big. Thinking big means rather than making a long list of the problems or the challenges and saying, well, how do I fix this problem? How do I fix that problem? Step back and say, what do I want to have my reality to be like? How do I want this watershed to operate? What are our goals of what we want it to be? And then work to make that goal come into a reality rather than just focusing on problems one after another. It takes a lot of strength to make that transition. So WOW is about creating anew, bringing that new vision into reality. And that vision needs to be a shared vision throughout the watershed. And when we say shared vision, we don't mean just from the water folks, we mean everybody, which is a really heavy lift. And we're still struggling to find how do we communicate with everybody. We think we've got their attention with this, big drought and the mandatory reduction of their special number that the water board is going to articulate next week. We need breakthrough innovations. If we're going to be as robust as we've been in the 20th century, if we want to continue that, we need to have breakthrough innovations, and we need to create a new water ethic. And that means that everybody in the watershed knows where their water comes from. That's a hard question to answer because it may be a portfolio of 5 things. How much of that water they use, we bill in terms of, cubic 100 units. No one knows what that is. What they put in that water, are they flushing down meds? Are they putting salt? Fabric softeners are full of salt. Salt management is almost everybody's problem in California. So knowing what you put in that and recognizing that what you put down the drain continues to the next community, it doesn't just miraculously go away. And where their water does go, who uses it next. Unless we know those things, it's really hard for people to recognize what their personal relationship is with water. So those are our 9 principles. So think about picking out the principle you relate to the most. Let's go really quickly in backwards. Creating a water ethic, breakthrough innovations, a shared vision for the entire watershed, thinking big, no one can do it alone. As citizens of the watershed, create synergies, see each problem as interrelated, working in concert with nature, and looking at the hydrologic whole.
Okay, this is the hydrologic cycle. You guys know this. Your neighbors do not know it. You need to share it with them. In the OWOW plan, part of our graphics of how everything works together, we have graphics like this where we try to demonstrate this. And it's a very difficult concept. And so you have to really rack your brain to think about how are you going to explain to your neighbors how everything is connected to everything else. And it really comes down to your grass. As we said before, we're going to survive if we manage our yards better. We're not going to do as well. Our economic activity won't be as robust if we kind of stick to the grasses. And you're not going to be able to meet your number if you stick with the grasses. So the deal is you have 9 months starting May 1st to achieve your number, which could be 32%, 36%, could be 20%. If you don't, your district is going to have a $10,000 a day fine for not achieving the number, and you yourself are liable for a $10,000 a day fine. This was just announced yesterday. It was $500 up to that point. They didn't think that was motivation enough, so it's gone up. So it's really something that we have to pay a lot of attention to. It's serious. So this is what I think our yard of our future is going to look like, glorious. This is a SAWPA demonstration garden. It uses 80% less water than the grassy knoll that used to be there, and it's beautiful. 2 kinds of ways we can go forward. 20th century was characterized by the hard path, which means it was bricks and mortars. We designed a plant. We built something to fix our problems. There's a soft path also, and I think that's where our future lies, and that's how we work with each other, how we coordinate with your neighbors, how you are able to convince your neighbors to do a 21st century activity, how you go about your business. I was invited once to go to Spain to help them celebrate their 1,000th anniversary of their water board. California Water Board came into being in 1914, so it's pretty overwhelming. And I decided to do a little research about them, and what I found out is they've never had a lot of money to build a lot of plants. What they've done is they've developed cooperative agreements, and they have thousands and thousands of cooperative agreements of how they work among themselves, and they're much more efficient about it. That's the soft path. We have a bond coming down. This bond is crafted, as you heard Assemblymember Rendon talk about, crafted to envision all of these 21st century principles that we've been talking about this morning. It's all embedded in this bond. Those people who are going to be successful in getting that money are the people who get on this bandwagon right away. We can get it right, and we can live in a glorious state with a lot of economic, robust economy, or we can continue working really hard, doing exactly what we've always done, and this will be our future. Thank you very much.